The Bronze Age was an era in which you wouldn't want to live. Long before the Abrahamic religions prospered, what we today comprehend as being good or just didn't even exist. Famine, disease, and being conquered were a constant risk. The nations of the time had two ways of surviving in this hostile world, either conquering everything in sight, like Sargon of Akkad, or trading until you can afford a stupidly enormous palace like the Minoans. Egyptians chose both, for in the grim darkness of our past, first come war and food, and then comes the moral. The two lands of ancient Egypt had been united around 3100 BC by the first pharaoh Narmer as the Old Kingdom, and after the first intermediate period, united again in 2055 by Mentuhotep II, creating the Middle Kingdom, and it was the latter who would rename the land as Kemet, meaning black soil, referring to the lands next to the Nile. He established a strict but fair rule, generating a centralized state, but still allowing local leaders to prosper, thus keeping them loyal. Two of Mentuhotep's descendants followed him, attempting to reconquer Nubia and other territories lost during the intermediate period, until the vizier of Mentuhotep IV, called Amenemhat, was sent to gather stones for the pharaohs project. While he was doing it, he had visions that were probably hallucinations, which he interpreted as meaning that he was destined to rule as a pharaoh because the gods had allowed him to experience miracles. That's oddly convenient, ain't it? He defeated the 11th dynasty around 1990 BC and, for some reason, moved the capital from Thebes to a city called Itawi. Itawi. I can't pronounce that, I'm sorry. His successor, Senusret I, in 1971 BC, is the one responsible for initiating the temple projects for the god Amon in Karnak, which still stands to this day. The following kings made excellent improvements in irrigation systems and farming in general, making Kemet into an agricultural powerhouse. It wouldn't be until the great Senusret III from 1878 BC that they will finally be able to reconquer Nubia. Yeah, that took a while, didn't it? This ruler was responsible for the golden age of the Middle Kingdom. He was likely the same king immortalized in the works of a later Greek author. Herodotus wrote about a pharaoh named Sesostris, which is Senusret but misspelled, and his conquerings in Asia Minor and parts of southeastern Europe, beating the Scythians and Thracians in battle. He had the habit of erecting monuments wherever he conquered to honor the courage and proficiency of his enemies in battle. But when Sesostris beat the heck out of an army without much resistance, he ordered the making of a pillar in their capital, but this one was with female genitalia on it to symbolize that the enemy fall like girls. It is said that there is nothing written about the cowards, but there are things like these. The Greek poet Diodolus went as far as to say that he conquered the entire known world, which included modern-day Ukraine and Ethiopia. His legends are very likely to be based in historical events, but a fair amount of the info is altered by however the author felt like in each interpretation. But we do know that the real pharaoh conquered a fair amount of the Levant and established strong commerce routes in all of his territorial gains, getting Kemet to the highest economical point it ever had and making it a de facto empire. But although there is no evidence that he held territories in Europe, having victories against some Scythian tribes is not out of the question. His son Amenemhat III is responsible for the construction of the Hawara complex, called Labyrinth, It does look complicated, to be fair. It was him who invited people from the Levant to settle in Kemet and aid with the agricultural and engineering work. It is believed that it's around the 1830s that the prophet Abraham gets his calling from God and takes his people to Canaan in their 430-year journey. During this period, the people of Kemet prospered. They were divided in three social classes: royalty, free people, and slaves. There wasn't such a thing as money, so the line between low and high classes amongst the free wasn't clear. Some had businesses of their own, while others were employees. And Egyptian trading was mostly an exchange of goods, and it was measured by using something called Devon. And you might say, but Jan, yes, my name is Jan, nice to meet you. Then, this Devon thing was basically a form of currency, right? Well, not really. It was just a measurement. For example, if a liter of wine officially equals 1 Devon and 4 chickens equal 1 Devon, then it is correct to exchange a liter of wine for 4 chickens. Yes, wine was very important for society. I mean, it still is. The wine was way more expensive than beer, and whoever was able to afford any of the two, which will be most of people, will drink it as a replacement for water, since the water of the Nile was deemed dangerous to drink. The reason? Well, considering that Kemet was home to almost 2 million souls, let's say the Nile was a lot of people's toilet, so alcohol will be part of daily life. Yes, even the children drank it, which explains why a lot of them had hallucinations later on in their life. And regarding the trading of goods, it was a measure of status. In relationships, when a woman was dating with a man, she would invite him to her house if she liked him enough. Once they were there, the man would put his belongings on the table as a marriage proposal. If the woman said yes, she would move in with him, and therefore were already married without wedding. Well, maybe a dinner night with her parents will be the equivalent of it, in which they will probably drink a lot of wine. If you think about it, these people were technically celebrating every single day. And before you say that's extremely materialistic, bear in mind that an average amount of goods afforded via an average amount of work would probably be a yes, considering that she already liked the man beforehand. Unless she was a lazy prick and expected him to do the work for the two of them, just like in any society. But let's say that in Egypt, both men and women were expected to do manual labor equally. Egyptians worked every day, by the way. When I say every day, I mean every single one. They didn't even have weekends and only rested from planting and collecting when their respective seasons ended, and thus the flood season will leave them unable to plant. But you see all of those big monuments all around Egypt. Guess in what season they were made, and mostly by free people for a wage. Some attribute their ability to construct and move colossal structures to aliens or mystical reasons, but even carvings from the tombs show an idea of the process, which required and was provided a metric bushel load of effort just to move a little bit. The daily intake was about 3,800 calories, which is way over the recommended of today. But considering how much these people worked, it doesn't surprise me that they were pretty much lean all year round. Besides of their obsession with working hard and celebrating harder, they were obsessed with pretty much every single thing related to appearance. Fashion, both men and women, grooming, both, makeup, also both. Linen was a standard for clothing, which is already a fine looking material for fashion in today's standards. Do you know who also looked good? The soldiers. Something about men in uniform, am I right? right, ladies? Their equipment and armors were oddly shiny and well kept. The Kopech itself stood out because of how it looked, not how good it was in an actual fight. The aesthetics of their warfare partially intended to create a desire for belonging to the army in the hearts of the young since early age. Warriors were glorified and immortalized for the mere fact of being brave and devoted to Kemet, being high members of society. Do you know who also were crucial members of society? The cats, or the uiiae, like the young people call them these days. I'm saying that like I wasn't 25 freaking years old. Being natural hunters of bugs and rats, they were responsible for keeping these away from the grain silos and any food containers in general, preventing contamination that could potentially be lethal, to the point of being deified with the goddess Bastet, and were given proper burials with the same efforts as any person, sometimes mummified. From 1807 BC, a child of Amenemhat III, Sobekneferu, took the throne, and as you can see, that's a female pharaoh, and she is the earliest confirmed woman to rule Egypt, since the previous ones are either only mentioned by Herodotus or there is not enough evidence that they ruled. She contributed to finishing the labyrinth and strengthening the faith towards the crocodile god Sobek, which she was named after, a god of protection, fertility, and military prowess. Sadly, she passed away in 1802 BC without an heir, giving way to the 13th dynasty, which didn't really shine at all. As a matter of fact, lost the loyalty from nomarchs that the previous one had. Around 1700 BC, right after the ethnically Levantine northeast of the delta at the city of Avaris broke away from the central authority as the 14th dynasty, when the second intermediate period starts. 50 years later, the West Asian Hyksos will conquer Avaris, adopting Egyptian traditions and gaining power over the rest of the Lower Egypt quite quickly, initiating a 15th dynasty of only Hyksos pharaohs, bringing technology and the use of the war chariot to Egypt. The Kushite colony in Nubia, having been neglected for decades, became an independent state, thus leaving the OG pharaohs in Thebes, surrounded by rivals. 1610 BC being the start of decades of active fighting on two fronts. This is probably where the Germans got the inspiration from to fight in multiple fronts in World War I and II, and they will probably do that again if we challenge them. It is now believed that it is during the Hyksos rule that the Israelites entered Egypt around 1610 BC, who settled as free people alongside many other West Asian settlers. And also at that time, a large wave hit the north coast of Egypt, followed by clouds of ash that caused famine, being a possible inspiration for the mythical plagues. You see, all of this happened because some place called Atlantis blew up. Wouldn't it be nice if someone explained what happened in there? Oh look, turns out someone made a video about it. Hope you enjoy it. The following centuries will see the pharaohs of Thebes defeating the Hyksos after gruesome military campaigns, giving birth to the most powerful age in Egyptian history, the New Kingdom. But that will be the topic for another episode. That's it. Now you know that the Middle Kingdom thrived in the 1800s BC, that the Egyptians liked to work hard and party even harder, that the Hyksos conquered Lower Egypt in 1650 BC, and that if you ever defeat anyone, it is tradition to make a soy boy versus Yes Chat meme. Shout!